Hello, my name is Alicia Shapiro with AInews.com, and welcome to another episode of our Driving Tomorrow Conversations with Industry Leaders, where we explore the latest developments and newest innovations in the world of artificial intelligence. Today, I'm excited to speak with Alex Fink, the founder and CEO of The Otherweb, an AI powered platform dedicated to improving the quality of information people consume online. With a mission to cut through the digital noise, The Otherweb combines cutting-edge AI models with user-first features to filter out clickbait, misinformation, and other digital junk, empowering users to access news and information that they can trust. After 15 years of developing perception systems in fields like cameras and computer vision, Alex shifted his focus to tackling one of today's most pressing challenges: the overwhelming flood of low-quality information on the internet. His vision led to the creation of the platform that not only aggregates high-quality content, but also provides users with full transparency, control over their feeds, and innovative features like nutrition labels for news articles. In today's interview, we'll discuss how the other web is defining the information ecosystem, the role that AI plays in fighting misinformation, and the way that Alex sees the future of news evolving. We'll also hear his advice for journalists on using AI responsibly in reporting. So thank you for joining us today, Alex.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Oh, I'm glad to have you here. I'm really looking forward to our talk today. Uh,
Likewise.
and like I mentioned, you had been working in perception systems for 15 years and you realized the world didn't need any more cameras, but better information. Can you start
Yep.
by describing what the other web is and how it addresses this challenge? And what was the moment or experience that solidified your vision for creating it?
Yeah, so there were a few stages to this. Initially, the basic idea was we wanted to help people select better information to consume throughout their day. And so the first iteration of OtherWeb was just a nutrition label. It was basically just something that tells you things about the article you're about to read so that you can figure out whether it's worth consuming before you consume it. The second iteration, which is what you still see today on otherweb.com, is basically a consumer aggregator tool that gathers news from 900 plus different sources, creates a summary for each one, a nutrition label for each one, in-depth analysis, lets you customize your feed in every possible way. We now even have News GPT, which is kind of like a chat GPT for news only, where you ask it a question like, tell me what's the latest in AI research over the past 2 weeks, but don't mention OpenAI. I already read about them yesterday. And it would give you a customized news report to your query. So that's all the consumer stuff. We now have across all the different platforms more than 18 million users to this. But lately, we've been branching more onto the producer side of the equation. So we launched a nonprofit called Open Press Wire, which basically creates a free wire under Creative Commons for journalists to use. So just like AP, Reuters, but free. All the content is theirs. All the content is written by AI, but it is original. So that is now out there since December. And we also created a suite of tools for journalists to basically write more efficiently called Press Hub, which is under presshub.ai, which includes the wires. So they start from something that is already written reasonably well, but it's a short facts only kind of article. And then based on that, they have a smart editor in there. They have a bunch of AI features. They can do research. They can fact check stuff. They can generate counter arguments to various claims that they want to counter in existing narratives, for example. And they can create an article, we think, 10 times faster than if they were just writing it from scratch. So we're kind of the vision for OtherWeb right now is trying to cover the entire chain. Content needs to be created, distributed, consumed, and monetized. If we can affect any one of these stages in a positive way, at the end, people will consume higher quality content, and that's the goal.
Yes. And I was just talking with someone the other day about this topic because they were like, well, how are we supposed to combat all the AI generated garbage that's out there? And I'm like, well, first of all, I think you need journalists who can understand the differences and be able, like you said, to use some of your tools even to help journalists write better so that they don't produce this AI garbage. Even though AI might be rewriting some of it, like you said, still original. What you put in is what you get out. And I think
Yeah.
that is very helpful for journalists. I can't wait to, I'm actually going to check that out
Yeah.
just to make sure I got
Yeah.
everything good.
And it's worth noting, I hear a lot of people complain about AI hallucinating. We trained AI on stuff humans wrote. So guess who hallucinated first?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I think AI, yes, AI generated garbage could be much worse than human generated garbage simply because it's free, right? Humans at least have to spend 15 minutes to write an article if they work for BuzzFeed, right? More if they work for some other place. But an AI can do it immediately and it will be free. But
Yeah.
at the same time, we're already drowning in all this junk that is being
Yes.
generated by the BuzzFeeds of the world, right?
Right.
So we need filters to help us with that. And we need to build those filters with AI in mind because AI will just increase the amount of junk 100-fold.
Yes.
So that was kind of our approach. Let's use AI for filtering first. And let's use AI to nudge people towards writing better stuff to begin with, because hopefully between the two of these, we can fight back against what we've been seeing for the past 20 years, which is the junkification of the internet, essentially.
Yes. Actually, that goes perfect into my next question because I was going to ask if you could walk us through how your AI models do filter out the misinformation, disinformation, and the clickbait while ensuring transparency.
So we have an unusual philosophy,
Mhm.
which is that we don't really believe that even a human, but definitely not an AI model, can look at a piece of reporting and say whether it's true or not. In
Mm.
some cases, you just can't verify it
Right.
because if you made a claim, there's a lion in my kitchen. Well, I can't verify that claim without breaking into your house. And I'm probably not going to do that. I don't have the resources. But in many cases, even if you make a claim that's not that outrageous, you just say breaking news. We have an eyewitness report that such and such, I don't know, did something on the street, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's breaking news. There's a chance that it's going to be wrong 5 minutes from now. I don't know if it's true or not just because it's breaking news, right? It will take time to verify it. And so our approach is true or false is actually the wrong axis here.
Okay.
What we need to do is basically come up with some rules for how reporting needs to be done, what needs to be included, what needs to be excluded. And these are rules that journalists actually have been learning in school for many, many decades, right? You
Yeah.
need at least two sources. You need to cite your sources or link to them, ideally, if this is online. You need to say what you know and not say what you don't know, which probably means you don't need to use big adjectives and a lot of hyperbole and things like that. You
Right.
need to stick to the facts or at least as close to them as possible. And so there are these rules that we can do, which just look at the form in which you laid out your idea. And from my perspective, even if you lay out an idea that is incorrect in this form, you have contributed something to the conversation. It's a high quality argument. Somebody can follow it. Somebody can follow your sources. Maybe they will decide you're wrong, but at least you gave them the opportunity to dive in. Whereas the normal form of clickbait or the normal type of article, let's say on TMZ, which is somebody's neighbor claims they saw them with somebody's fiance, you can't even follow that argument through. So just based on the form in which it was laid out, I consider that a low quality article, even if it happens to be true. The fact that it's true does not redeem it in any way. It was still a bad article. So this is kind of how we approach things. We analyze the form and not the substance. And we're agnostic on the substance. We don't know if it's true or not. But we can tell you whether it included all the right attributes that a good article needs to have, written in language that sounds factual and kind of sticks close to the facts, doesn't make any outrageous claims without citations and references. And we analyze the form. And if a human can analyze this form, so can AI. AI is just faster at it.
Yeah. That's great. One standout feature of the other web is giving users full control over their feed and adding the nutritional labels to news items. Why was this level of customization and transparency important to you, and how have users responded to it so far?
I think it's mostly because we're all engineers, and so we
Mhm.
didn't really know what we are supposed to do in the market, as most
Mm.
companies with marketing do. And so a lot of these features were added because one of us thought they were cool, and
Mhm.
that in itself was reason enough to add them. But others were just because we don't know what the market need, or at least we didn't know. And it's
Mhm.
clear that what's out there today is not really solving people's problems, right? People seem to be pretty depressed and pretty anxious when they read the news. So clearly, the existing way to select news for them in other feeds doesn't quite work that well. So we thought, okay, let's just give people all the tools that we can think of and let's see what people show us that they actually want.
Got it.
And it's also worth noting that I think there is a mismatch between what people actually want in the long run and what they react to in the moment. So
Mm.
you can think about this with food as an example. If somebody offers you cake on the street, do you want to sample this from a nearest bakery that just opened up? You're probably going to say yes. If they offer you kale from the nearest health food store, you probably are going to say no, right?
Right.
But do you want to eat more kale or cake in the long run? So there's a difference here between what you want and what you react to. And what most feed algorithms do is they maximize engagement, which is maximizing what you react to. And so over time, you get the things that triggered you the most, and you're really unhappy after reading them all day because that is not what you wanted to consume. If I asked you ahead of time, what percentage of your content would you like to be triggering and depressing and outrageous? It's probably not going to be 90 plus percent. But if
Right.
you go to TikTok or YouTube or any of those services, you are going to get more than 90% of that because that's what you reacted to last time you read something like this. So this is in part why we wanted to make all these customizations explicit. So even if we have an algorithm that does work in some engagement-like manner and tries to optimize things that you reacted well to in the past, we want you to be able to go in and override it, or even just to see what the algorithm inferred about you. Maybe it will be shocking to you that the algorithm decided you really like depressing stuff, right?
Yeah.
But we actually classify every single article that enters into the system based on which emotions it is most likely to evoke, and depressing is one of them. And then we do let people actually customize it and say, hey, I want stuff that is more hopeful and educational and less outrageous or depressing, or vice versa. We don't know
Mhm.
what people like. But we think it's better to put that up and onto the surface to actually see what people want and to what extent that differs from what they reacted to in the past.
That's fabulous. I think that's spot on. And it is interesting how you were saying there's a difference between what triggers you and makes you react versus what you actually want in the long run. Could you go into a little bit more detail about what the nutrition labels do and what's on them for people to understand how that matters?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned form checking before. The nutrition label is basically the output of all the distinct models that we have that
Mhm.
evaluate various traits of the content. So you mentioned clickbait. Like we
Mhm.
actually have a distinct model that just looks at a headline, looks at the body of the article, and tries to determine how likely it is that this headline is clickbait, meaning it is attention seeking and doesn't match the content of the article. And if it is likely to be clickbait, then A, we put a line item in the nutrition label that says clickbait, likely yes. And
Mm.
B, in the platform itself, we actually replace it with our own AI generated headline because we don't want to have clickbait on the platform. But obviously, when you click through to the article, you'll see the original headline that, let's say, the Daily Mail put in there, and it's likely to be clickbait if our nutrition label said that. So we have about 20 of these models, and each one tries to determine typically one narrowly defined negative trait that content might have. And there are a few lines that are just informative. Like you might want to know whether it's written in a formal tone or in an informal tone. You might want to know how complex the language is. Is this like a 14th grade type of write up or a 7th grade level, right?
Yeah.
So we have some of these things that aren't good or bad, they're just useful for you. There are some things that are negative traits that we detect, and some things that are my personal pet peeves. So I wanted to bring them up to the surface, like affiliate links.
Yeah.
So there is a special line item that says whether or not this article has affiliate links, because in my mind, if I am, let's say, shopping for a new product of some sort, the last thing I want to read is any page that has affiliate links on it. For something else, okay, I don't mind if I'm reading the news and it mentions a location and there's an affiliate link to TripAdvisor, okay, I don't care. But if I'm searching for the best laptop, I do not want to read about laptops from a place that makes
Right.
money when they send me to Lenovo.com. So that's my pet peeve. We implemented it.
It's a good one. I agree with that. And you mentioned News GPT. It enables users to interact with the news in everyday language. What role do you see conversational AI playing in shaping the future of news consumption? And what are the challenges of implementing it effectively?
So let me give you first the big futuristic view here, which is that as the price of writing content goes down to zero, and it obviously is because AI is becoming as good as humans at writing, I think it becomes entirely unreasonable to write an article for multiple people. People are different. We know their preferences. Maybe one has a short attention span, another has a long attention span. Maybe one has a strong preference for a certain type of language describing their stuff, like purely technical. Somebody else has a different preference. So if the cost is zero, why not write an article just for you? That is the long term view where I think basically our feeds will not actually be aggregating one article from the New York Times, one article from the Washington Post, one article from here, one from there. It will be all stuff that AI wrote just for us because it's free. So why not?
Yeah.
Now, on the way there, what we can do is customize a news report to a person. That is much easier than writing entire articles from scratch for that person. We can aggregate the most interesting stuff that relates to their query. And then we can write a news report that matches their preferred length and their preferred language and everything else we know about them. Of course, without changing the facts, we don't do that stuff. Other companies probably might. But within those constraints, we can customize a news report to them because feeds are kind of limited. And so
Mm.
it's not quite clear why somebody should see 100 items in the feed and maybe 30 of them are relevant to them when we could
Right.
just reply to their question.
Hmm.
They could say, tell me what happened in the past 15 minutes. They could say, tell me everything that happened in sports over the past 2 days because I haven't watched the news in 2 days. We can create a news report to their query. So I think that is definitely the next step in how people consume this type of content. And personally, I'm not sure that feeds are going to be a thing 5 years from now in all their shapes. Facebook, the Twitter. I don't know why a feed should exist if AI can just write for you.
That's a good point. And then that would solve everybody's complaints about how the algorithms are biased and they're not seeing anything, and now they can. It's very, very
Yeah.
powerful. I tend to agree with you.
Well, I do want to caution here that AI can be biased too.
That's true.
Especially if the way we train AI today is, well, first of all, we select the data set. We can have a bias there. So a company needs to be really, really careful when they select the database not to introduce any biases there, especially the
Yes.
company that makes the base model. We saw this with Gemini. There were a few really
Mhm.
famous examples in
Yeah.
Google's approach to this. But then after this, you have the stage of reinforcement learning through human feedback.
Mhm.
And at that stage, where basically you ask the model to output two different answers to the same query, and then a group of humans selects which one is better. And you do this many, many, many times until basically the model starts pleasing the humans. This creates two problems. Well, one of them is that whatever bias those humans had, it's probably going to be a bias that now the model carries forward. And it might be a very unintentional one. So let's say that we don't want it to have a right-wing bias or a left-wing bias. So we really, really try to equalize the number of Republicans and the number of Democrats in there. But it just so happened that the only people we could afford were students because, they're kind of cheap and we can pay them less. Well, students have some biases relative to other age groups in the population. In fact, relative to other demographic groups, beyond just age, socioeconomic. Students are not working class, obviously. So we already introduced some biases in there where now it's just a young person from the creative class kind of bias. That's going to be pretty odd when that model makes decisions for you. And so we're seeing a lot of this, and actually, a lot of what people call hallucinations is often that. It's the model trying to please the people who were grading it in the previous step. But the people who were grading it in the previous step were a particular non representative group of the population. And that results in some interesting things happening.
That's a good point. I never thought about that way. That's so fascinating. And one thing I'd like to point out to people is the Other Web operates as a public benefit corporation. How does this structure influence your decision making, particularly when it comes to balancing the public good and financial stability?
So if I give you first the purely legal answer,
Okay.
it's that it gives me a bit more freedom. Essentially, if I were a regular C corporation, then my sole fiduciary duty as an officer of the corporation would be to maximize the shareholder value
Hmm.
of the company, which means that if I ever have a conflict between the public good and making a little bit more money, I would not be allowed to balance those two in any way. I would have to just make as much money as possible because that maximizes shareholder value. And that is a problem for all C Corp executives everywhere.
Yeah.
Essentially, often they know what the right thing is. If they do the right thing, their investors can sue them personally for violating fiduciary duty. So, from my perspective, what the public benefit corporation structure does is it actually says, and I also have a public good objective that the company must maximize. And now, as an executive, I can balance the two. I can look at the two and I can decide, okay, sometimes this is just egregious. I have to do the good thing, even if
Mhm.
it means we lose money, right? And sometimes, well, we're still a for profit company. We have investors. We have to make them happy. So we kind of err on the side of making a little bit more money. So legally, all it does is give the executives freedom.
Yeah.
Now, in practice, it's not purely legal. If a founder of a company actually chose to do this extraordinary thing and create the company as a public benefit corporation, they're probably not just looking for a little bit more freedom, they're trying to actually do some public good. So this is our case as well, but it's maybe tomorrow somebody who isn't me will run this just as a C corp and they will be legally allowed to. In our case, we are trying to maximize the public good. Sometimes it actually comes up. Like we had a pretty big dilemma, we still do, which is, well, at some point we have to monetize this thing. How do we do it? Do we add some sort of advertising but still keep it free for everybody?
Mm.
Or do we just add a big paywall and say whoever is not willing to pay won't have access to the content?
Yeah.
I have a strong preference, even though I don't like ads, to do the former and not the latter, because I want this platform to reach as many people as possible. That is the public good we are seeking. And so, even if we can make slightly more money by monetizing using a paywall, I probably wouldn't go that route because
Hmm.
that means suddenly the number of people that read high quality information went down 10x. Right.
Right.
So it kind of enters into these kind of decisions quite often.
Hmm. I think you're right on that because I'm the same way with our AI news company. I'm very adamant that the news is free to people. I will not create a paywall because just on my own self, I don't want to pay just to read an interesting article. I'm very much against having paywalls on my own site and things like that because I do. I want to keep it open and free to everybody. And I don't like ads. I hate seeing them on social media. I always hide them and say I'm not interested.
Yeah.
But so I know the value of the ads, like you said, but I think it's a lesser of two evils kind of. I don't want the
Yeah.
paywall. So,
Well, and we also have to consider that in the news business, there are a lot of outlets that are free, that don't have a
yes.
paywall.
Yeah.
So being the paid product in a market where some of the products are free is always difficult. Even if your product is better, you're probably not going to reach that many people because a lot of people are just trained to think that this is free. So
You're
I don't
right.
know if this is a good position to be in. And I'm like you, I am in this industry. I want to help other people in the industry.
Mhm.
But if I go to any website and it says, you've already read your 3 articles this month, please sign up, I just close it. It's
Yeah.
not even that it's the paywall I'm allergic to. Just the
Yeah.
pop up itself, even if it has an X, I will close the entire window because in my mind, I came for the article. I don't care what else you're trying to tell me right now. This is not what I came for. So I will
Exactly.
not even read it. And I don't want to be that website to our users. I want to be the place where they come. And if they came for an article, what they see is an article. And maybe after 10 articles, we'll show them an ad. But first, they have to get what they came for and not some stupid pop up.
Yes, I agree. And kind of looking ahead, how do you envision other web evolving to maybe improve the quality of information people consume? Are there any new features or initiatives that you're excited about?
So right now we're pretty excited about the producer side of the ledger
All
because we're
right.
seeing more and more journalists actually start using it. Both the free product that is spun off as a nonprofit, right, just the newswire, but also the tools themselves.
Hmm.
We think that there's kind of a force multiplier there because if you reach a journalist, it's not one person that you've
Yes.
affected, it's hundreds or thousands of people who read their work. So we're really excited about that. On the side of the consumer platform, we are investing quite a bit into the customization features, specifically with new GPT. We want it to be able to really answer in your style as much as possible. So we'll see more and more changes specifically in that. Still, right now, I would say it's almost 50-50. About half of our users use new GPT and half of our users still go to the traditional feed. Again,
Hmm.
because it's not quite traditional, it's our feed. I don't know that all people want something that was written just for them. Some of them actually still want to see which outlet this came from. The more time passes, I think the less important it will become. And again, I've already predicted the death of feeds in this episode. I might as well predict the death of publications as a thing. So,
Oh, nice.
because if you don't need to aggregate articles, or if this same article is never shown to two people at the same time, why do you need this thing that takes a few hundred articles together and calls it the daily issue?
Hmm.
Probably don't, right? Whoever can write, but I'm not quite sure what the brand name that wraps multiple articles together means anymore. So We'll see. Maybe it still makes sense in opinion journalism, let's say, in punditry, because
Okay.
there you do care who said it.
Yeah.
But in just reporting the facts, I just want to know that it's reputable and it was somehow
Yeah.
vetted and laid out in the correct form. I don't really care who said those facts to me.
Exactly. I think you're right. We kind of already touched on this quite a bit, but maybe if there's other insights you can think of, where is the news industry, do you think, headed in the next 5 to 10 years? And what role do you think platforms like your other web and AI technology in general will play in shaping that future?
So I think one of the things that is becoming really obvious is that if tech is becoming essentially really good at writing, and it's probably going to do a lot of the work the journalists are doing right now. You could almost think of that as mechanizing agriculture in the 1920s, right? We used to be that the farmer could only cultivate 30 acres. Now they can cultivate 4,000 acres. Why? Because tractors, right? So certainly you need far less farmers, but it's not like the industry died. Agriculture actually produces better stuff and way more stuff. So it is good for the industry. It is bad for the people working in it right now, probably. And in agriculture, the result was that just during the 1920s, about 90% of people working in agriculture lost their job. We went from 30% of the US population working in that field to 3% working in that field in a decade. So I
Wow.
think we're going to see probably something similar in probably all the professions where the output is words or numbers, not
Hmm.
just journalism. So accounting, law, I think all of these professions will be affected in the same way. But in journalism, that is one thing that is bound to happen. But then the other thing that is bound to happen, and I don't know if here agriculture serves as a good example, but it's not clear to me that there should be a distinction between news media companies and tech companies. Like the two
Mm.
can just merge. If it's tech creating 90% of the news anyway, then
Yeah.
either the news media companies basically have to consist entirely of tech teams and just some investigative journalists to actually find the new facts. But for the most part, most of what is customer facing that they're producing will be done by a tech team. And then they are technically a technology company, not a
Hmm.
media company. Or technology companies will step in and just hire the investigative journalists that they lack right now, and everything else will be done by their tech. But
Wow.
either way, I'm not sure we're going to have that clear a distinction between New York Times as a news company and Perplexity as a tech company. I think you'll have more and more companies like Otherweb that are kind of both,
Hmm.
and maybe that will be the entire industry.
And that got me to thinking too, because going away from the traditional media and companies and things like that, if these AI agents really do take off this year and they can do actions on behalf of humans, they could just write the news. You could just ask your AI agent, like
Yeah,
kind of like your other web, and get
yeah.
the news for the day. And you don't need the New York Times or Wall Street Journal.
Well, that is exactly my point. That I think that most of what people will consume will be written just for them. Now, whether it will be their agent that they tuned or a
Hmm.
centralized service that this is what they do for a living, they write the news for people, sort of like Otherweb,
Hmm.
it doesn't matter. But ultimately, yes, the things that the New York Times produces, its value will be in the fact that they have their own investigative reporters that actually flew to some place that nobody else has gone to. Maybe they spoke to a whistleblower in a garage somewhere that nobody else could get to. Maybe they just badgered the politician over and over and over until the politician accidentally told the truth, right?
Yeah.
You don't know. But that is the added value of somebody like the New York Times. It's basically what ProPublica does today, right?
Mm.
That is the added value. But the writing itself, it's going to become a free service.
Yeah.
You don't actually need humans for it anymore because AI will be better than the vast majority of journalists, even.
Wow.
So that is, I guess, my prediction of where the industry is going. Now, there is a dark side to this prediction
Hmm.
that I kind of want to cover here, which is if it's much cheaper to copy from your neighbor, then why would you hire the investigative reporters yourself? You
Oh.
can just wait until they do the investigation, then copy from them. So we potentially have a tragedy of the commons here, where
Hmm.
everybody prefers to copy and not to do the original work because
Yeah.
it's more expensive to do the original work. So we as an industry will have to figure out how to subsidize this basic research, as they say in science, right?
Yeah.
Science has the same problem. We always have to figure out who does the basic research because most commercial companies would just prefer to wait until something is close enough to production, then do a little bit of design for manufacturing and go.
Yeah.
They don't want to research something 50 years before it gets productized.
Hmm.
So the government steps in, nonprofits step in, universities step in, etc., to make it happen in science. I think we'll need a similar system in journalism. Otherwise, we'll have the same problem. All the outlets out there, all the publications with a big brand name, will just figure out that you can write your own version of the article 1 minute after somebody else published it.
Right.
So why be first? What's the value? Like a
Yeah.
scoop isn't worth that much anymore because now it's not a 1 day head start, it's 1 minute, maybe.
Yes.
So it's easier to just be second.
Yeah, on that short time frame. That's a great point. Lots to think about. It's very fascinating for me anyway.
Well, it is always fun.
Yes. And before we wrap up, I'd like to ask a couple of lighter questions so our audience can get to know you a little better. When you do step away from your work, what are some activities or hobbies that you're passionate about?
I wish I had time for any of those. So
I know.
right now, I have work, I have two small kids, and if I have time, then I usually go lift because it's the only way to clear my head so
Yes.
that I could work again. So I don't even have time for any activity that requires scheduling. So
Yes.
I wish I had time to do boxing or jujitsu or anything like that because I used to enjoy these things in the past. But
Hmm.
just the idea that the class is at 7 p.m. or whatever, that is
Oh,
unfathomable to me because I don't know if I'll be free at 7 p.m. So for me, if I happen to have a free minute at 11:23 a.m., that's when I go lift, right? It's not, I can schedule this class in advance at a particular time. So that's my life right now. We'll see how long I can last in this position. But for now, lifting kind of does the trick. Just
yeah.
it's complex enough that the brain can't do anything else at the time, so it has to relax.
Yes, that's a great point. And it's good for your health. So you're doing
Yep.
something for yourself. I identify with that so much. I basically work out, and then eat and sleep. It's about all I do.
Well, in my case, I just add to that a little bit of time with wife and kids.
Yes.
Otherwise, we'll have a problem on that front.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And finally, as AI continues to shape the media landscape, what's the most important piece of advice you give to journalists or media professionals who want to integrate AI responsibly into their reporting?
When you said what's the biggest piece of advice you can give to journalists, I just felt like saying learn to code. But
Yeah, well, maybe.
because they used to say that to all the working class people just a few years ago.
That's
Um,
true. That's true.
but yeah, I would say if we are entering a world where far fewer journalists are producing far more and are being far more productive, then whoever is the first in adopting these tools is going to be among these 10% that remain in the industry and become far more productive.
Yep.
Those who are not among the first to learn those tools and learn how to be really proficient with them will likely be the ones who will have to find a new job in a few years. So if a journalist wants to remain a journalist, they have to be ahead of the curve when it comes to adopting the latest and greatest AI tools. It means every time something comes up, even if you don't know if this is something you need right now, you have to download it, tinker with it, figure out what it might be good for, take mental notes that, okay, maybe it's not useful for me right now, but when something else comes up in the future, maybe I can integrate those two things together and then it will become useful. But you have to be among the first early adopters of this technology because this technology is going to be 90% of your industry at some point.
Yes. I think that's such an important piece of advice for sure. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Alex, for joining us today and sharing your insights. It's really been a fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed talking with you and learning more about OtherWeb. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Good. And to learn more about OtherWeb, you can visit the website, otherweb.com. Keeping you connected to tomorrow. Today, this is Alicia with AInews.com.